Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 110th edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, hosted by me, Mac B, the Wolf, and as usual, I am joined by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the U.S., Gary Action Jackson. And we're here to wrap up our 2022 Year in Review show that was getting so long and in depth that we had to break it up into two separate shows. So hopefully you tuned in to show 109 last week, where we went over all the guest podcasters, journalists, and writers that we had on the show in 2022. And we had a lot of fun talking with them and talking music, talking books, talking records, talking concerts, things like that. But we also, on that last show, talked about all the concerts we got to review, both me in England and for Jackson in the U.S. And I did, of course, get to traipse over to America. Jackson and I could see our first show together in 28 years since we were in college together for Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets, which is, of course, something our friends at Pantheon Podcast helped sponsor and helped us be a part of. And we were just so proud to be part of Pantheon and to support Nick Mason and the Saucers on that tour. And it was fun to just kind of have live music back again, right? I mean, in 2021, didn't really get to see much of it. 2020, not a whole lot of it either. So it had been a while, and some of us were holding tickets for a long, long time. We're just so happy to have live music back that we had to talk about it. And so hopefully you had a chance to listen to show 109 and reminisce on everything that we got to do. But on this show, we wanted to go walk through one by one all the artists, all the musicians, the legends that we had on our show. Look, folks, we're not rock journalists. At least we haven't been most of our lives. You know, we're in business, just white-collar, boring jobs. That's what Gary and I kind of do for a living. That's how we pay the rent and keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies, you know. But we have this passion for rock and roll, and when the pandemic started, we decided to start a podcast so we could talk to each other and talk about music that we liked and music that we were discovering at this point and share it with each other and just kind of share it with the world. And as the show grew, we started to say, hey, we'd like to have some guests on. And we started to make a list of folks who we'd love to speak with. And fortunately, in 2022, that came to fruition. We got to talk to some amazing folks who we loved all our lives, like Geoff Downes, who's a founder of Asia and was the first man ever on MTV with Trevor Horn in The Buggles with Video Killed the Radio Star. We got to talk to Carl Palmer, also of Asia. We got to talk to Chris Slade, who we knew from The Firm and AC/DC, but he's played with all sorts of people. We got to talk to Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt of the Rock on Tours and of Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets. So these were big deals for us, and we really wanted to take our time and just reminisce about the 9 interviews with the 11 musicians and legends that we spoke to on the Ugly American Werewolf in London this past year. So we want you to kick back and listen to that and enjoy reminiscing about some of the conversations we had. Before then, just a little bit of business here. Of course, we are part of the Pantheon Podcast Network of podcasts, nearly 100 shows, and really there's something in there for everyone. It's not just classic rock, although there's some great rock shows on there, and we've been on some of those other shows or had the host of those shows on our show before. So we'd like to give out shout-outs to those folks like Jay at The Hook Rocks, like Christy Alexander Hallberg of Rock is Lit, like Christian Swain of Rock and Roll Archaeology, like Tom and Zeus of the world's #1 ranked Kiss podcast, Shout It Out Loudcast, and of course to our dear friend Paul Stevenson of Vintage Rock Pod and This Day Rocks. We are on there fairly regularly with little snippets for him. I think we're going to be on shortly, I think on the 7th of January, so look forward to that one. But Paul's just a big friend of the show and has helped us with our sound and to get guests, so we appreciate you, Paul, and we wish you nothing but the best in 2023. And let's not forget Martin Popoff, the incredible rock writer who has history in 5 songs with Martin Popoff. He did a great show with us on Blue Oyster Cult towards the end of the year. But maybe more important to you is you want to go check out our sponsors, Rare Vinyl. You go to rarevinyl.com. They are based in the UK, but they ship all over the world, and they have the most amazing selection of albums, LPs, 12-inch, 7-inch singles, CDs, tour programs, posters, all sorts of things rock-related. It's not even all rock. There's 250,000 items in their catalog. And like I said, they ship all over the world. They have an amazing team to curate and take care of all this stuff and then make sure once you find it on the website, it gets to you. Go there, find something you love, use code PODCAST, PODCAST, and then you get 10% off all your orders, not just the first order, but every order you make with them over time. Use the code podcast, save yourself 10%. Might knock off that shipping charge, might save you enough to buy one more precious item there. So definitely check out rarevinyl.com. You can also find them at EIL.com. But on this, our 110th show and second part of our 2022 year in review, we're talking about all the rockers, all the legends that we got to speak with this year. From Amanda Lehmann to Deobrah Bonham and Peter Bullick, the run of the Asia guys with Geoff Downes, Carl Palmer, and Chris Slade, legendary Steve Hackett, Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp of the Rock On Tours, Amanda Hawk Percival, and Jim Cregan, who's probably best known for his time with Rod Stewart, but an amazing guitar player and songwriter. It was an honor to have all of them on the show. I did get to see some of them perform live this year, which was great, and I will go see more of them perform live in the future, that's for sure. So here we are, part 2 of our 2022 In Review show, where we're talking about the artists, the legends, the musicians, the rock stars that we had on the Ugly American Werewolf. So we appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you following the show. And we appreciate all the amazing guests. So listen up to me and Jackson doing our thing here on The Wolf. Well, I just got another bit of news from our sponsor, rarevinyl.com. Okay. You remember yesterday or a couple of days ago, we said, okay, we've had over 100 orders using the code podcast. It's up to over 130 now. So I don't know if people are coming in at the holidays, like, okay, yeah, I need something for that special rock and roller in my life. I might as well get something. But that's great news. I mean, you always wonder if what you're doing is paying off for somebody or helping them out,
Yeah, absolutely. That would be nice. And it's just nice to know that people are actually using this thing and listening to the show.
Well, exactly. It means not only are people listening to the show, which obviously makes us happy, but, look, anybody could sponsor the show and we'd be happy to push their product. Depends undergarments for that special person in your life. I'll sell anything if you pay me, right? But when I found rarevinyl.com, I'm like, well, that's actually a really good synergy right there. People who listen to the stuff we're talking about are record collectors. And if you want to go find first edition or mid condition or tour programs or CDs or whatever it is you're looking for, you got 250,000 items in stock. If you can't find exactly what you want, you probably can eventually, or you can find something else that's really cool.
Yeah. And that was the other thing. I mean, when you first told me about this, I thought it was just records, which, that's great. But the amount of stuff that they have is just ridiculous. And the scope of it too, like he had those Queen, some kind of like promotional deal.
Yeah, like point of sale, record like bins, like from News of the World Robot or something like that.
Right.
To put the records in, like they had half a dozen of them or something. Like, where did you get those?
So they have records that you always wanted, and then they have stuff you never knew you wanted, but have to have it as soon as you see it on there.
Right. Needful things. As soon as you see them, like, I must have that. Yeah. So go to rarevinyl.com, use code podcast, save 10%. They ship all over, and they've got just great, great, great stuff. And like we did that Van Halen show, and usually every week I try to do some kind of social media post to tie in to the show's topic or theme that week. And they had this amazing, like, Japanese box set of Van Halen singles. I was like, whoa, man, that is awesome. I would love to have something like that.
Yeah.
So it's always worth checking out.
Cool.
Now, we're kind of in the last stage of this part of the show, or this show here. And we saved it for the 9 interviews we did with artists, which, again, 2 years ago, it was something we dreamed about and something we thought we could and should do. We weren't really sure how to go about doing that. We weren't sure how to link up with that. So we just kind of started to put our feelers out there and get in touch with publicists and agents and folks like that, kind of see what happens.
And again, when we first started doing that, we thought, boy, would it be great to get one of these people, anybody, it didn't matter at that point in time. And to have the number that we did this year I still have to pinch myself to think that we actually got to talk to the people we did.
Well, I have to agree with you there. I mean, talking to somebody who I don't even know their music, and don't even know anything about them. That would have been a good step forward for us, but we went out there and kind of targeted, okay, well, these folks would be great to talk to for because we like their music, because they fit into the theme of the show, whatever, they have a new album, that kind of thing. And obviously you don't get everybody to respond, or not everybody says yes, at least not right away. But a rock and roll kid's dream to talk to heroes, to talk to actual rock stars that they grew up watching on MTV and listening to their music. This is the dream come true part. I mean, not that talking rock with you once a week isn't a dream come true, Jackson, but every once in a while I get someone on here who actually does it, who I've paid for their records, who I've paid to see play live, and then ask questions I've always wanted to ask. How cool is that?
Right. And to go back and think about when we first started listening to these records, or, first started listening to them together, and could you imagine sitting there in the college dorm saying, hey, one day we're going to get to talk to Carl Palmer, Geoff Downes, Chris Slade. Yeah. And you would have said, yeah, okay, whatever. That would be nice, but there's no way. And then, to have the person pop up on the little Zoom screen, like, there they really are. Oh my goodness. Yeah. This really is a dream come true. If we ever make millions of dollars, that would be fantastic. However, getting to talk to these people and do this show, it sounds cliche, but really is reward enough at this point in time.
Well, absolutely. And I feel like we need to set our sights on thousands of dollars before we get to millions of dollars.
Or just dollars.
Yeah, exactly. How about break even? Given all the equipment I keep buying and it keeps not working or whatever. Oh man. All right. Well, let's walk through it, because the very first guest we had on, and I did reach out to her publicist, was Amanda Lehmann on episode 61 early in 2022. And again, Amanda is a brilliant guitar player and singer and songwriter, but I had gotten to know her because I saw her play with Steve Hackett at the Palladium in London. And not only does she come out and sing on songs like Shadow of the Hierophant, but Steve has ultimate confidence in her. He lets her double him on his solo to Every Day, his signature solo song, and a solo from that song, which is so amazing. It's not like, okay, everybody clear out, I'm going to the front of the stage and spotlight on me, He's like, no, he's happy to share it with her. And when I saw her do that with him, I'm like, wow, she's really amazing. And at that night, because she basically they do an opening set of solo stuff, and then they did all of Seconds Out without Amanda. So she's kind of the opening act with Steve Hackett for Steve Hackett. But I was tweeting right away, like, oh, Amanda Lehmann was so great tonight, and then boom, she retweeted it right there. I'm like, well, she's right on social media right this second, isn't she? So when I reached out to her publicist, it was great that we got to talk, and we got to walk through her Innocence and Illusion album track by track.
Yeah, and it was nice to meet her, someone who, like you said, is a proficient singer and player, but also a really nice person, very humble to talk to. Great to go through her record and just get to know her a little bit over the computer here. We actually were lucky enough to talk to her twice.
That's
and
right.
It's interesting to talk to a woman who is basically in a very male-dominated field of rock and roll guitar hero.
Well, that's absolutely right. And I admit that when I was a kid, I'm like, I don't want to see some woman play the guitar. But I got to tell you, in this day and age, everyone's saying rock is dead and stuff like that. I feel like women are playing a pretty important role in keeping rock alive. We get bands like Plush, you get bands like The Warning out of Mexico. You got someone like Nita Strauss who's going up the charts. You're seeing a lot more women in rock these days. And I think it's brilliant. I think it's awesome to see,
Absolutely.
And yes, she is part of Steve Hackett's band, and obviously Steve Hackett gets a lot of press because he was part of Genesis. He's a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was on all those classic records in the 70s and has made so many on his own and with so many other people. But I just thought it was great to be able to talk to her about her music. And then, maybe pepper in a couple of questions related to, touring with Steve or Genesis and that kind of thing. So yeah, you're right. We talked to her again about her single One Last Spin, which is to combat, gambling addiction, on episode 70. But this was just, we spent better part of an hour with her, and she was very gracious with her time.
Yeah. And it was interesting to hear her music too, because it's not really in the same vein as Steve. There was some different tracks on there. And so it's always nice to hear new music and to be exposed to someone and then get to talk to the person who actually made it and kind of what was the beginning part of this? How did you get there? There was some personal stuff that she put in there. It was really interesting to go through the creative process.
Yeah, how does a songwriter craft the output, the thing that you hear on the record, And yeah, it's not like if we listen to classic rock radio, drive around in our cars, we were ever going to hear that in the U.S., So even if you heard one song on one GJ's special show, you're not going to hear the whole thing. So I was really happy to spend some time. And yeah, as soon as you have your first artist interview, then you're like, okay, here's what I did well, here's what I thought we could do better, and then you have confidence going into and she gave us compliments. She's like, no, you guys asked thoughtful questions, so I thought that was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. If we could have rearranged or arranged the order of how we were going to do this, she was definitely the best person to go first for us.
Absolutely. Now, just so happens that her publicist also represents Deobrah Bonham and Peter Bullick. And, I get a lot of publicists and people saying, hey, this band's got a new album coming out. You want to, hear it, and then you could have them on the show, and I love getting that kind of stuff. And I love learning about new bands like that. But this is kind of a classic rock show. And if I don't know your band at all, and this is like their second album, it may not be a good fit for the show, and if I've never seen them or whatever, I might say, okay, well, thanks, but, I'm glad to know about this band, but, I don't know if we're going to have them on the show. Their publicist sent me tracks from their new album, the Bonham Bullet Blues covers album that they put out. And I was like, and he wasn't even like, hey, have them on the show. He's just like, here's their new thing. If you want to check it out. I'm like, oh, I very much like this. This is very, very good. This is perfect for a show. We'd love to have them on. So we booked them for show 72, Deobrah Bonham and Peter Bullick. But unfortunately, because you had some family emergency stuff going on, you were traveling in Europe. We had just been together talking to Amanda the second time together live. And then you were about to go back to the States. And unfortunately, you had a family emergency. And that's the only show that we've ever done that didn't feature both of us. You weren't on the show. And I kind of regret that because I wanted you to be able to talk to Deobrah and Peter, obviously. But we were kind of at that stage, like we weren't really in a position to like turn people down, or say, hey, we can't do what we scheduled. Can we do that again? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I was right. We had a little bit of an emergency, and I was very sad that I couldn't do that, but I understand. I was like, my family comes first. That has to be the number one priority.
Easy,
you handled it perfectly. I was just sad that I wasn't part of it. Hopefully, we can have them on again because it sounded like you guys had a great time. They're definitely a fit. I know when you first brought that up, you were like, it's John Bonham's sister, and she's got a record out. I'm like, well, yeah, sure she does. Okay, well, we'll see. And then you play the music and you're like, wow, this is really, really good.
It's amazing.
And it's, and it was, like you said, it was just a perfect fit for the show and two just awesome people to talk to.
Yeah, super folks. And you know how it is with the blues. You can't play the blues fantastic when you're 22 years old. They've lived and loved and lost enough to get to this point that they've earned the right to play this music. And they really picked out some great tunes. The way they arrange it, the band is tight. And they enjoy, I think they enjoy talking with me. Crazy enough, their first apartment in London together was right around the corner from where I lived, right off Abbey Road. And I walked over there afterwards and sent them a picture. I'm like, yep, here it is, But, great stories from them talking about touring with Paul Rogers. Peter's a great guy. He's funny. He's the kind of guy that we would hang out with for hours at the pub, just like shooting shit and telling stories.
Right until the time when I passed out because I couldn't hang with somebody like that. What did he call himself? He was the Irish werewolf. The ugly Irish werewolf in England. Yeah. Yes. Wow. You knew he was going to be trouble, but they just sounded awesome. And then the whole tie-in with Christy also was cool.
Well, I was happy to be able to do that. Yes, Christy Alexander Hallberg, who is our friend, we talked about having her on the show earlier, and her book, Searching for Jimmy Page. Yeah, there's a story in there about how she went to John Bonham's grave and actually met Deobrah
that day. She was visiting his grave as well. And to share that story with her and to get her a copy of Christy's book, I think really made Christy's day as well. And so anything we can do for our sister Christy, I'm happy to do.
Yeah, so I'm packing for that trip, and I'm thinking to myself, of all the things I can't forget.
Right.
I can't forget your copy of the book, and I can't forget what did she? It was a note that she wanted us to pass along to Deobrah, and I'm like, I cannot forget this. That would be the worst thing.
And we didn't read it. We didn't read it. We could have, but we didn't. That was a personal note from Christy to Deb.
Just a courier.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
And happy to do it.
So, I don't know if we'll get a chance to see them play live. If they come to America, though, we've got to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
We got to track them down. Yeah, absolutely.
That would be too bad if they were like at the Whiskey or something. I had to go to L.A.
I was thinking about this because you know who Christy had on her show recently is Miss Pamela DeVar.
Yes.
And Miss Pamela still does pick out cool outfits for rockers. And if I could get a budget together, how cool would it be to make an appointment with Miss Pamela to help me pick out something cool, like if we were going to a show or an event or something like that? Yeah, how awesome would that be?
That would be awesome.
Have her dress me for something? That would be amazing.
Exactly. Because Lord knows we can't dress ourselves.
Good.
What is that, shorts and a T-shirt?
Well, yeah, it's May through September. What else am I? It's 100 degrees in America where I live during that time. No, that was a lot of fun. I was just sorry that you weren't a part of it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that there was just one, and I'm glad that the medical issue was taken care of. So that's in the past now. So
obviously, yeah. I mean, I was like, look, let's make sure the family's okay. The show is really not that important in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
much as we like it, you know.
Yeah. That's what I kept telling myself, that it all works out for a reason. It was good. I'm glad we got to do it. And you're right. At that point in time, we couldn't say, well, we need to reschedule. Yeah, you'll reschedule to never. How about that?
Exactly. Fool. Whoever you are. But no, it worked out great. Now, speaking of rescheduling, anyone who's listened to like the first 25, 50, 100 shows know that we have this soft spot in our heart for prog pop sensation Asia. John Wetton, Steve Howe, Geoff Downes, and Carl Palmer. And we used to have a few drinks back in the day, back in the dorm in the day, and we listened to whatever, AC/DC, Metallica, Rolling Stones, whatever. And then it's like, you think it's time to put Asia on now? Do we have a good enough buzz to put that on, and crank it up and annoy everybody down the hallway? And that's just something we did. So from the first shows, because we did shows like 24 and 25 were our first Asia shows. And it kind of like we did the first album or so, the 24th, and we did kind of alpha through everything else after that. And we did the box set review. I want to show that. It was show 54, 55, something like that. So yeah, we were trying to get. We really wanted to get Geoff Downes on because he is Mr. Asia. His Twitter handle is @AsiaJeff. So he's Mr. Asia, who's the only guy who's really always in Asia. We had it lined up to talk to him, and then he had to cancel. Or he was double booked, and his PR, she got back to me and said, sorry, he's double booked. Let's do it next week. So I'm like, okay, we'll do it next week. And in the meantime, we then interviewed Carl Palmer.
Yeah.
And then I went to his publicist's office, and we chatted for a while, and she gave me some swag. Including, some nice box set kind of stuff and some records and cool stuff. And then when I got home from her office, we found out that Alan White had passed away.
Right.
It happened that day.
Yeah, that day.
Oh my God, I was just in his publicist's office. And then, God, he just passed away. I feel like that was on a Thursday. And then on Monday, we interviewed Geoff. So we were one of the first interviews with Geoff after the passing of Alan White. So on show 79, we interviewed Geoff Downes. It wasn't really long, but we got to talk to him a little bit about what Alan had meant to him. And that was kind of a poignant time.
Yeah, and he was very gracious to give us the time, but also to talk about Alan, because like you said, that was pretty raw, pretty fresh for him. And I think that if I remember correctly, I don't think Alan it was pretty quick before they said, oh, he's sick, and then he passed. So that's right. It was still really fresh to him. And I don't know if he, had even gotten to process it yet, but he was very nice to talk to us about himself and also his relationship with Alan.
Yeah, and they had already known that Alan wasn't going to be able to play on the tour, so they had Jay Shellen all lined up to do his drum parts,
right?
Which they've done in the past. But it would have been one of those things like Alan could come out on stage and wave and say hi, or maybe. And then let Jay handle the drumming or whatever. So they're getting ready for the Close to the Edge at 50 tour. So we kind of combined his interview with our review of Close to the Edge. But it was also at the time that they were releasing the box set of Asia in Asia, like the recording of the MTV satellite broadcast of Asia in Tokyo, December 1983, with Greg Lake instead of John Wetton. And it was cool that they'd finally given this like the deluxe treatment, and it had all these great goodies in it, and the colored vinyl and stickers and photos and pins and all sorts of neat stuff in it. So not only could we talk to him about something a tour he's about to go on, but about the re-release of this kind of special moment in the history of television and the history of rock and roll, the history of MTV that he was a part of, and that was really cool.
Yeah, and it was interesting that we got to talk to him and Carl at about the same time. I think they were maybe a couple of days apart. Yeah, to kind of give both their takes on that Asia tour and show.
And I've badmouthed that show a little bit just because it doesn't have our boy John Wetton in it, right? And but Greg Lake came in and did an amazing job in 3 weeks time, a month time, learning all the parts on bass, learning all the songs. And I go back and listen to it now. It's not as I used to just. I gave it no credence because it didn't have John Wetton. I'm like, well, that's not even Asia. To hell with that. But go back and listen to it. He actually did a pretty darn good job, and they had to tweak a few things, maybe change the key a little bit for him, but he did an amazing job.
Yeah, and that was one of the stories too. And I don't remember now who told the story. I think it was Geoff. How they were supposed to play one song in a different key, not as high, so that Greg could sing it and not struggle with it. And they didn't. I guess they forgot or whatever.
Yeah,
and
went right into the song. It's like, oops, I'm doing it the usual way.
Correct. And they said Greg he didn't pitch a fit. He didn't do anything. He sang it high, and he did a great job. But like just a consummate professional of not just turning around saying, "What are you doing?" and walking off the stage or anything like that. He just kept it rolling. So yeah, I mean, it really is kudos to him to have gone in there and done not just that show but that whole tour. When that band was so big, I mean, that could have all just fallen apart, that they were having a problem with John. I think it was a conflict of personalities or something at that point in time.
Right. And I think John was doing some heavy drinking, and Steve Howe is for the most part a teetotaler. He, doesn't eat meat, doesn't take hard drugs, doesn't really drink. So he's like, this isn't working. We're getting rid of John Wetton. I don't know. They say it was Kolodner who suggested Greg Lake. That said, hey, Carl, why don't you reach out to Greg and see if he'd be willing to do this? Because like we booked this, we paid a lot of money. David Geffen is not joking. This has to go on. We've already advertised it all over MTV. It's happening. So go find a fucking bass player who can sing. He's like, all right, yeah, well, I guess I can do that. And it did all work out. And Carl talked a little bit about that. I mean, talk about we didn't know if we'd ever be able to talk to anyone from Asia. And then in the same week, we talked to half of them. I mean, shows back to back, show 80 with Carl Palmer. It was interesting because we talked to Carl about, Asia was going to do like a 40th anniversary tour of America, and I think they had that kind of lined up. And then what happened was the Close to the Edge thing, it got booked out further. Like, okay, there's interest in Japan. There's interest in the U.S. So now Geoff and Steve can't do that. Not that Steve's in Asia anymore, but now Geoff can't do it. So we might have to push it back. What I would love to have Carl back on to talk about is the ELP, like the 50th anniversary ELP kind of reunion, quote unquote, that he just toured the U.S. on, which was him piping in Keith Emerson and Greg Lake's not only music, but vocals and showing videos of them and stuff like that. I'd like to know how that went and how he felt about how it went down.
Yeah, it was. I would like to hear the same thing too. I know that there is some that's a very hot button topic now in the world of rock and roll. The backing tracks and is a live show live. But it's one thing when it's the person who's on the stage and they're augmenting the vocals. I could see how you would get upset with that. But for people who have passed away, you don't really have another choice other than to bring in straight up other musicians. But you really want to see ELP play. And yeah, he was a great guy to talk to. It was interesting because I don't want to say he hijacked the interview, but he definitely directed traffic right off the bat. So I remember, like, we were all excited. We had this list of questions, and then that was out the door really quick. He's like, here's what we're talking about. Okay, this is your show. And then so we kind of had to like rearrange the question order and everything. And yeah, he's a really great guy. And to hear the memories of that show and that tour were really cool too, because like you said, yeah, we kind of just wrote that off because it wasn't the original band, but it was still a big tour, still a big deal, and a huge deal for MTV.
Huge deal for MTV. And I wish I could get my hands on the whole video. I mean, through YouTube and some places you can get it, because in addition to the actual show, the actual concert, they kind of did a run-up, and I don't know if it was 45 minutes or an hour or something like that, but they kind of did a run-up to the concert to kind of show these guys in their element. And you see Steve Howe like playing guitar like with his kids, and like here's Greg Lake, he's back in like Ireland or wherever he is, like getting ready for the show, and here's Carl on Tenerife, and he's with his daughter, his baby daughter on his knee, talking about how he wants her to become a lawyer one day, which she did, which is amazing, So it's too bad it didn't include that, but through technology, we kind of get our hands on anything. And if anyone out there has those clips or, has access to them, send them to us. We want to see the whole thing.
Yeah, that was one of the great parts about that when you were you brought that up with Carl, and he's like, oh yeah, she did become a lawyer. She's my lawyer right now. Okay.
No, she said, no, you can't afford me. Like,
you
can't, I can't be your lawyer.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
That's right.
That and going back and looking at that, it hammered home the fact that I think what was his name, the VJ guy, Mark Goodman, I think was the MC for that night.
That's right.
Which I totally forgot about. And if somebody ever wanted to do a documentary on the original days of MTV, that would be really great to watch, because to think about, they got to do everything. There was no segmented, you're the this person and this other guy does punk and this guy does rock. You just you could do it. You could go from talking to Wham to talking to Ozzy Osbourne in 35 minutes.
Right.
And so, yeah, to get that call, you're going to go not only MC this giant satellite driven show in Japan. Okay, boss, I'm on the next plane. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. No, and I think, there is a Pantheon podcast basic that is led by someone who was part of MTV back in those early days. And so definitely check out those episodes. But yeah, I mean, it would be so amazing to talk about what it was like putting MTV together. Like, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were just trying to get enough content on there for 24 hours a day, And it was beautiful. That's the thing. It was wonderful. Now MTV sucks. I wouldn't watch MTV for 5 minutes today.
Correct.
But back in 81, 82, 83, I mean, and really, even though they started having shows in the mid to late 80s, Headbangers Ball, 120 minutes, I love those things, man. It was a great way to get different kinds of music that you don't always get. But, Asia plays maybe an outsized role in our music appreciation, but they played a pretty big role. I mean, look, Geoff Downes was on the first video ever shown on MTV. Video Killed the Radio stuff, right? And then he was on the first ever worldwide satellite broadcast. That's two huge seminal moments that were so important to us in our lives. And yet Geoff Downes is still not a household name for the most part.
Yeah, unfortunately. And just a great guy to talk to. Again, very humble. And yeah, just the amount of stuff with the both of them, actually everybody that we've gotten to interview, it's been refreshing because nobody's really kind of full of themselves. Like, you bring that up and they're like, oh yeah, I did do that. Okay. It's incredible. But after a while, I think you've done so many things that it's just like, yeah, that's just another in a history of things that we've gotten to do, tour the world, play in front of zillions of people and still be able to do it today. I mean, we were talking about the Close to the Edge and doing that tour, but yes, just put out another new record. So, I mean, he's not slowing down. He's still out there doing his thing.
And from what I understand, they are touring in 2023. They're finally going to do Relayer, which they were supposed to do for the last few years got postponed, and then they changed it close to the edge because that's kind of the bigger draw at 50. But I think they're working on another album as well, from what I understand. Plus, he's trying to do something with Asia next year, I think. I mean, no grass is growing under Jeff's feet. He's working.
Yeah, and so that just proves that that's really what he wants to do. It's not, he doesn't have to. He really just loves creating new music and playing in front of a live audience.
This is Neil from Def Left Pod.
Hey guys, this is Ryan Condal, the executive producer, writer, creator of House of the Dragon.
Hi, I'm Amanda Lehmann.
Hey guys, this is Chris from My Rock and Roll Heaven.
Hi, this is Christy Alexander Hallberg, author of the novel Searching for Jimmy Page.
Hey, this is Anna Stella.
Hi, I'm Deobrah Bonham.
And I am the Irish werewolf in England, Peter Bullick.
Hey, this is Tom and Zeus from Shout It Out Loudcast, and you are listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast.
Hi, I'm Paul Stevenson from Vintage Rock Pod.
Hi, this is Carl Palmer.
Hi, this is Geoff Downes.
Hi, guys, this is Chris Slade.
Hi, this is Steve Hackett.
This is Sonny Hollywood Pooney.
Hi, this is Gary Kemp.
And this is Guy Pratt. And you're listening to
the Ugly American Werewolf in London
podcast.
So that was the first two. We had 3 amazing artist interviews in a row. 79 was Geoff Downes of Yes in Asia. 80 was Carl Palmer of ELP in Asia. And number 81 was legendary drummer Chris Slade, who's played with everyone from Tom Jones to Olivia Newton-John to Manfred Mann to David Gilmour to AC/DC to Michael Schenker to Asia. That's right, folks. He even had a stint in Asia. Okay. And I just remember when we were in college, when we lived together, AC/DC Live came out, which is the first real, I mean, I think 74 Jailbreak was live, but it was the first live album to kind of feature all their hits, almost a de facto greatest hits album at the time, to be honest with you. And it featured both Bon Scott and our boy,
Brian Johnson's
songs on there, which was really cool. And I just remember seeing him in the Thunderstruck video when we were in high school. Like, would you look at that guy? The guy with the shaved head. He's like a menace, man. I can't believe it. But he could not have been nicer. He was so generous with his time. And that story of that afternoon or that day where he got a call from David Gilmour, and David Gilmour asked him to go out on tour with him. He said, yes, David, I would love to. And then he goes down to the pub to have a few to celebrate, comes home. Then he gets a call from Jimmy Page. Said, do you want to join a band with me and Paul Rogers? He's like, well, I'd love to, Jimmy, but I kind of got this David Gilmour tour to do. He's like, okay, yeah, no worries. Go do that. And then we'll hook up with you when you get back. I'm like, that's the greatest day anyone's ever had. Are you kidding me? It's amazing.
And to hear him tell that story, like, that's the way it goes. I mean, I thought it was great. And the fact, too, that he was adamant about fulfilling his contract with David Gilmour. I can't do this. I've said yes, I can't do it. And then Page being cool enough to say, whatever. I mean, nobody tells Jimmy Page what to do, so we can wait. Right. As soon as you're ready, we'll go ahead and do it. And to be part of the firm with Tony Franklin also on bass. And man. I can't remember now if I really was super familiar with them before AC/DC. And so it was like, this dude's been in another band with Jimmy Page. Oh, really? And to go back and discover that was really cool too. But yeah, to talk to him and kind of get his take on joining a band like that and being with the Young brothers and Brian Johnson, you've got to be pretty sure of yourself to go into a situation like that, especially for a band like that. I mean, the firm was a new, yes, it was Jimmy Page. Yes, it was Paul Rogers, but it was new. They were doing new music. You're going in, you got to be able to play all of the AC/DC stuff, note perfect, not just for the fans, but for basically Malcolm Young.
For Malcolm, yeah. If you can't handle it, you're not going to be around.
Right. He was very small, but he would cut you in half in 2 seconds if you weren't up to the challenge.
That's right. And hearing the story about being in the studio is like, and the producer's like, can you do dum dum? I was like, yeah, I can do that. Now get me 2 big bass drums in here, and I'll do that. Dum dum. And it's so cool. And I have seen AC/DC a couple of times without him. And hey, they're always great. They're always fantastic live. But that song without him is just not quite the same.
Yeah, because he is, as much as AC/DC has a sound, he was able to kind of put his put his signature on that. And yeah, I always thought that was cool. The video was cool, and to see him as really the first guy in rock or metal to go with the bald look was, yeah, I mean, he was very menacing, and he just looked. I remember in the promo photos too, he looked very menacing because he looked like he was about 8 feet tall.
I know. It makes you look so tough. And when he's kind of scowling, he's got his mouth over, he's going, yeah, nah. I'm like, wow, would you look at that guy? He's insane. And the thing is, I knew the firm, I knew Radioactive. I just didn't know anybody other than Jimmy Page,
right.
Until I grew up a little bit. I'm like, oh my God, that was it? No way, that's cool, So, but I mean, dude, he played with Tom Jones in the 60s. It's not unusual. He was on that song, dude. You gotta be kidding. And we lost Olivia Newton-John, not that long ago, it was this year. He played with her in a band called Tomorrow. I'm like, God, the guy has been around. It's unbelievable. And you know what? He still does it. He was touring this fall. He was out there hitting the skins. So God love him. So glad he can come on anytime.
Yeah, and I'd love to see that Timeline show if they ever come. I know they do a lot of European days, but if they ever come to the States, I would love to see that show.
I know, that would be so much fun. Lots of AC/DC stuff, some Manfred Mann stuff. He was in Uriah Heep. I mean, he has an amazing, amazing career. I think he does Comfortably Numb because it's not like he didn't do it with David Gilmour on that tour, So
yeah.
Which, by the way, I think Guy Pratt was in a band that opened for them on that tour. So he must know Guy, but we're getting to him here very, very shortly. Now, look, getting Geoff Downes on was always our goal. I mean, from like day one, we're going to have a podcast. Anyone you'd like to talk to, Geoff Downes would have been top of the list. But our 5th and 6th shows were basically me trying to convince you that Steve Hackett was this unappreciated genius that you and I didn't grow up knowing anything about. And I had really gotten into him. And so we did a couple of shows on him and on his role in Genesis. And those shows did very well for us because he and probably his wife, Jo, who I think has a hand in his social media, they retweeted us a bunch of times. And I remember after we did our first 2 shows and we've had 21 total downloads. We've had 29 total downloads after a couple of weeks. And then we shot up to like 500. I remember Christmas Eve, 2020. And I sent you a picture like, congratulations on your first 500 downloads. Like, that was such a monumental accomplishment for us. We were so proud of it. And it was really just because Steve and Jo had retweeted our shows out there to his legion of followers, But obviously at that point, then we wanted to say, hey, we want to get Steve Hackett on the show.
Well, yes, we said it would be very nice to get Steve Hackett on the show.
Right. But he's a big deal. He's a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We can't just say, hey, can I have Steve Hackett? Yeah, sure. We want tomorrow? Nah, it doesn't work that way.
But we've mentioned this on the show several times that really the great part is when you get introduced to something new that you've never heard before.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's Steve Hackett. Okay, all right. I'll listen. That's fine. And then you say, yeah, he is that good. Why is he not a household name in the United States? And it's because Genesis in the United States is probably 83 to 87.
Right.
That's the big albums for us. But yeah, to listen to that and to get into his style of playing, which is not what I was really used to at that point in time, but more, I don't want to say it's not really so much jazz. It's more like orchestral arrangements.
Yeah,
that was not really what I was ready for in college. But to go to get introduced to it now, yeah, you can see how this guy is just a beast. And we were talking about Amanda before, a guy who does not mind sharing the spotlight. It's his show, but he will step back and let the other members of the band kind of shine in their time.
Well, I know, and it's like he's an open channel. I mean, his output is incredible. It's amazing. I mean, go to Tony Banks, Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, and Mike Rutherford, and even throw in Mike and the Mechanics. He's put out more solo albums than all of those guys put together, and he's been prolific since they got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he's been prolific about putting out a new album every couple of years or so, put out 2 during the pandemic, basically. And then every time he does a tour, he does not only a live album, but a DVD to go with it to show the performance. And then usually maybe some kind of documentary, maybe about making the album or being on tour. Just very good to his fans. And so we've been trying for a long time. So let's try to get him on. And finally it happened. He snuck us in right after he had finished up like his Australian and Asian Far East part of his Seconds Out tour, comes back to England before he starts kind of retooling the set list to get ready for Foxtrot at 50, you know. And again, great conversation, kind of him to make the time. But he is our first member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to be on the show.
Yeah, and a cool guy to talk to. And like you said, he was in the middle of totally retooling his set. So, I mean, it was, I think, I can't remember exactly what the spread was, but it was maybe a week or less than that, where you had to basically change the entire show. And what was that like as far as learning that music for him and the band and putting it all together? And yeah, he was just like, yeah, just, you know, we just change.
It's not a complete retool. I mean, you know, some of the stuff from Foxtrot, you know, was on Seconds Out, right? So it's not like he hadn't played any of this stuff before, you know. And but you know, then he's got to mix in other songs. He's going to maybe put in some of his solo stuff, you know. So it's like, yeah, let's change this up. However, something new for the next year. It was just a lot of fun, and you know, so and it's just so cool that like 10 years ago, I only knew his name, knew he had been in Genesis back in the day. Didn't know anything about his music. Then about 8 or so years ago, I started to get into his solo stuff and his Genesis stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is so good. Why isn't this bigger in the United States? Then I moved to England. I get to see him play. You know, I'm trying to convince you, dude, this is somebody who rock radio just missed out on for us. You know, you got to understand who this guy is. And then to be able to get him on the show number 87, wow, special. Yeah. Special time for us. That
was another one too, where I knew he was coming on, and you know, it was just the two of us, and then all of a sudden the other window pops up, and you're like, okay, here we go, and then he comes on there, and yeah, just a very nice English gentleman who he was very humble to talk to, but you could also tell, like, I mean, we could still be on with him.
Oh yeah, we had tons of questions for him. But you know, it's one of those things like we sharing lines up stuff for him. He's got back to back to back to back.
Yes.
So it's like even if he wanted to give us 20 more minutes, he couldn't. You know, he's got someplace else to be. You know?
Right. Yeah.
But super guy and super talented, and hey, he's not letting any grass grow under his feet either. I guarantee you. He's going to be, I mean, he's already got stuff lined up for 2023. I guarantee you he'll come back to America. So who knows? Maybe you'll get to see him then.
Hi, this is Jim Cregan, and you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London. And they're just the best.
Okay. Now, as we've mentioned, we are part of the Pantheon podcast family. And it's an honor for us because there are some great shows on there. We always talk about our friends who we've been on their shows or had on our show kind of thing. But there's also like real legends on there, like, you know, Carmine Peace and Vinny Appice are on there, you know, and Pamela DeBar has her show on there, you know, so it's pretty cool. And so really what the advantage to that for us is to have some camaraderie with other podcasters, to maybe share some resources, get a break on pricing on some of the things that we need to create our podcast and publish it and things like that. And maybe you can get some guests on, you know, from other podcasters who might want to say, hey, you know, you need to talk to this publicist, or you want to have this guest on, that kind of thing. And obviously show 75 was about me going to see Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets at Royal Albert Hall. Unbeknownst to us, Pantheon worked out a deal to sponsor Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets tour in the U.S. And when they said, okay, well, some people are going to get to interview Nick and maybe some other folks, we're like, yes, we are all in. We want to do this in the worst way. And they gave us some stuff for social media to do it. And obviously, we were upset that maybe we didn't get to interview Nick, but you know, he wasn't going to do 20 different podcasts. You know, he was just going to do a few. There is a pecking order, and we're still relatively new compared to some of the folks who are on there. So we understood that. But I said, listen, we'd love to have Nick. I know you need him for bigger people, but we've got to have Gary and Guy on, because on our third show, when we reviewed Delicate Sound of Thunder, both the movie and the live album, we're talking about how much we like Guy Pratt and how he's got this show, The Rock on Tours, which is actually pretty darn good. And he does it with Gary Kemp. Wouldn't it be cool to get him on? Like that'll ever happen, because we still didn't even know what the heck we were doing on the podcast. We didn't know how to record it right. We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know anything about social media. At that point, I'd been on Twitter like 2 weeks, so that'll never happen. But I said, hey, look, Guy Pratt does follow us on social media, because when we did the show and I said, hey, look how awesome Guy and Gary were there, they gave us a follow, so I think that helped convince the Pantheon folks that yes, we were worthy enough to get Gary and Guy on. And honestly, that was a blast.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you were mentioning about the Rock on Tours. It's a great show. There are two guys that really enjoy each other's company, enjoy telling stories, enjoy interviewing people who are there. It's a mix between their heroes and their contemporaries. So it's a great show to listen to. But I remember that was one of the first podcasts that I listened to try and mirror or at least pick up some things on how they interacted with each other for our show, because they just did seem like it was real easy for them to hang out and have these conversations. Yeah, so getting to talk to them live, it was exactly the same thing. The two of them are just, you can tell how friendly they are, and they kind of have they weren't, just like that playful back and forth, and they didn't step on each other. Like they knew exactly how to interact with each other and us. It was really cool to get to talk to them for a little while.
Yeah, and Guy he can take the piss out of you, right? He's not afraid to throw a jab here and there. He's pretty good at that. He's funny, And you're right, it was them, and then it was Shout It Out Loudcast. Those two that I found kind of early in our podcasting careers, like, okay, this is the kind of thing. Obviously, we can't get the guests that Gary and Guy get, right? Because we aren't as famous as they are, and we don't know these people very well. But it's that kind of back and forth. I'm like, yeah, this is good. And that's how they share the spotlight together. This is awesome. And just to hear Guy talking about singing Rick's songs live. Of course, Rick was his father-in-law. Rick is his son's grandfather. And to have his son in the crowd to see him sing these songs, it's like, oh my goodness, how emotional. And the fact that he would just talk about that is amazing. And look, total respect for Gary Kemp, because like Spandau, okay, they're kind of a pop band. They were around in the 80s. In America, they have 24 hits in the UK. In America, it's basically true, and that's it. And I knew him almost as an actor more than a singer-songwriter kind of thing. Yeah. And obviously he didn't sing in Spandau. That was Tony Hadley. But just I have so much more respect for him after seeing him play live. I'm like, he's a fantastic guitar player. Right. This is amazing. And the insulting British press is like, who knew he was such a good guitar player? I'm like, I guess I have to fall into that category, but I'm not going to say a backhanded compliment like the press over there. He's awesome. He's great at what he does. And they had fun on stage. They look good and they're enjoying themselves,
Yeah. And I think Nick said it best at the show. He went from a new romantic hero to a guitar god,
to a prog rock hero.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to watch him play, you would never know that he was in this basically, I mean, I don't know what you would call it in England, but I mean, it was a pop band in the United States.
Pop band, blue-eyed soul, they kind of go for you, a new romantic kind of thing,
right, but definitely not what he's doing now. So to watch him up there doing his thing, and like you said, just having a great time with Guy and Nick and Lee and everybody in the band. It was great to it was great to see them. My only regret that I have was that I didn't get to see the show first. I mean, we had talked about it. I kind of felt like I was there from your retelling of it, but that was the only thing. I'm like, man, I'm going to see it. I promise I can't wait, but I'd love to have them back on again at some point in time just to talk about it from having seen the show and then being able to talk about it from that point of view.
Yeah, and who knows what the future's going to hold. Is Nick going to say, okay, that's it, I'm going to put the saucers down now and I'm going to go back to retirement? If so, would they then go do something else together? Who knows? They've written plays and scores and stuff like that. I mean, incredibly talented, but who knows? Whatever they're into, and obviously I continue to watch or listen to the show. But the Rock on Tours, it's fantastic. Hopefully they'll not quit doing that anytime soon. But I like to see musicians who are in their early 60s. They're not that old. Get out there and play. Get out there and do it. And so now I'm interested. Gary Kemp's got a solo album. Yeah, I want to hear that.
Sure.
Guy Pratt's coming to. He's coming to Amsterdam. He's doing some like a speaking engagement at the Hard Rock. I may not still live here at that point, but I do have a ticket. So we'll see. I guess I don't know, but whatever they do, I'm full support of them. And yeah, maybe who knows when there might be an opportunity to have them on again.
Absolutely. Okay,
so those were big. That was a huge get for us. That really made our day, really made our show. But we realized, sometimes it's good to talk to an artist who isn't a household name, who isn't from one of the biggest bands in the world like Pink Floyd. So we had a friend, again, from Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon podcast family, hook us up with Autumn Hawk Percival, who is an artist. I think she's kind of bi-coastal. I think she's mostly California, but sometimes she's in New York. And despite the fact that she's a beautiful and intelligent young Black woman, she loves prog rock. Her dog is named Jethro Tull. And so I said, all right, well, she's got an album coming out here soon. Would she want to educate us on something we don't know much about, which is Gentle Giant, British prog legends who may not be that well known in America. But you hear a lot more about them in England since I lived there. So I'm like, all right, if she knows about these guys, their album Octopus that had the great Roger Dean cover was turning 50. Maybe she'd come on and do that. And she graciously did.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And when you set this whole thing up, I've got to admit that of all the interviews that we did, this was the one where I was like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Right.
You've got a, like you mentioned, a young woman. I don't know what her age is. I would.
She's like 30.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes me feel better because I would have thought she could be my daughter, but that would be a very hard. The timing would have been off for that.
That'd have been when we lived together. You would have knocked up her mom. Yeah.
Right. So, not out of the question, but
physically possible, but it wasn't going to happen. Yeah.
So somebody who's a lot younger than we are, an album that I'd never listened to before, and it was early for me. She was on the West Coast. It was even earlier for her. I didn't know how this was going to go. I'm like, here we go. In about a minute and a half of the interview, I'm like, this everything is working here. She's great. She's a fun person to talk to. Mm-hmm. The music that she makes at that point in time, her album's out now, but she had demos that we got to listen to that were not. They were not anything that I would listen to if I didn't know didn't know her. So that was interesting to listen to that. But yeah, just a great person to talk to. She had a great perspective on the album. I think she said that she had a friend whose father was into it, and that's how she got introduced into
Gentle Giant.
Yeah. And prog rock. And just somebody, again, very easy to talk to. We could have her back at any time. Would love to get her back to talk about Jethro Tull, since that's her, like you mentioned, she named her dog Jethro Tull.
Yeah, that's her wheelhouse. Fan. Yeah. No. She was lovely. Just a fun personality, fun to talk to, and smart. Very intelligent. Knows stuff that we don't. Uses words that we don't.
I'm trying to look them up while she's talking.
And she plays, all the instruments on her album. She had been in a band. She's like, that's kind of a pain. So I just do all the instruments, write all the songs, do it all myself now. And plus, she's a beautiful woman. She's kind of ruining the vibe of the ugly American werewolf.
Every once in a while, we
give her a pass. Yeah, that's right for that. And I guarantee you we'll have her back on. The release may not actually be coming till February, but she did sign with a record company, which is really awesome. I'm happy for her. I'm proud of her. And whatever we can do to help promote her, Autumn Hawk Percival, and you can find her on. I feel like she's more on Instagram than she is on Twitter. But you can find her, with pictures of herself out, maybe even with her sisters sometime. She's quite a cook. You see all of the things she likes to put together on social media from time to time. But that was a fun show. It was great to meet somebody new.
Yeah, absolutely. And get introduced to new music, both that she was making, but also on the Gentle Giant side. So that was a like I said, I went in with a little bit of, I didn't know how it was going to go. but it turned out to be great. Yeah, just a really nice person and somebody who we would have never gotten to talk to if it wasn't for the show.
I know. That was show 101, right after our 100th episode on Nick Mason's Sauce Full of Secrets Live. And then we kind of wrap up the year on show number 108 with Jim Cregan, who is a very accomplished guitar player and songwriter, someone who had collaborated with Rod Stewart basically for about 20 years or so. Lots of albums, lots of tours, including the Unplugged and Seated that was so big when we were in college, that also featured Ronnie Wood. And again, it was Paul from Vintage Rock Podcast, who we owe so much to, who really connected us with him. And not only would we talk to him about anything, anytime, but he has a single out, a holiday song, which was a Johnny Mathis song, I believe called A Child Is Born, that he reworked, added some lyrics, added a bridge to, I believe. And it was all to benefit Angel Force USA, which is to bring awareness and to help veterans who may be feeling suicidal, to help them out, to make sure that they get the help that they need. I'm like, wow, great cause and great stories. Let's get the guy on. And he did not disappoint.
Great guy to talk to. Great stories. What I loved was you asked him about Paul told you to ask him about the Sex Police.
That's right.
And but it was one of those things where it was like, well, I don't know if I could. Anyway, so we were doing this thing. And he obviously
into it.
He feigned, well, I don't know if I want to do this for about a half a second, and then went into it. Yeah, just another guy who we could talk to forever because he's got so many stories and is just loves to talk about being a musician and playing with the guys, and the whole story about Ronnie Wood showing up with the giant cooler full of anything you could ever want. And are you thirsty? Yeah, I could be thirsty. What do you got? Yeah.
And Britt Eklund answers the phone. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
How hot was she back then? Oh my God.
Let me let you talk to Rod. You know what? No, I'm good. Just you stay on the phone, Britt.
Keep talking.
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
And the songs that he played on, I mean, he's on more than 50 gold and platinum records, man.
Yeah.
Young Turks and Hot Legs. He played on all these songs. He co-wrote Forever Young with it, among others. Just an amazing career. Again, not necessarily a household name, but his band, Cregan and Co., they gig out a little bit. And he was talking about going to Rod's Christmas party, and like, and Ronnie will be there and Kenny Jones will be there. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like a blast, dude.
And the part about how, you're standing at Rod Stewart's house playing and he wants to get up on stage and you look him in the eye and tell him, you know what, you can't sing like this anymore. Go back and sit in your wheelchair and we'll let you know when it's time. Unbelievable. Just, to be part of that party would just be fantastic.
So much
what is it like at a club or something? No, at his house.
At his house in the country. Yeah. Yeah, must be rough.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And honestly, I mean, I feel like this year it's going to be hard to top, as far as the guests that we wanted. If we had scratched together on day one, give me some names of folks who you would love to talk to. Geoff Downes and Carl Palmer, Chris Slade and Steve Hackett, Deobrah Bonham, they all would have been on there, and Gary Kemp, Guy Pratt, you're right. It's like we didn't even dream big enough, it's like you don't want to dream too big. You want Mick Jagger and Eric Clapton. It's like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. But, find folks who you adore, who have something to promote, and let's see what happens. Let's start to make some inroads and see how it goes, and so I'm very proud of all we've done, of all we've accomplished here. Gary, guys who are unknown with no experience in radio or broadcasting, with not a lot of technological knowledge, that's for sure. You can hear the difference in the quality in some of our shows, and no internet or no social media following or experience whatsoever. We've built it into something that I'm proud of. I'm proud to wear the Ugly American Werewolf T-shirt around and have people ask me what it is,
Absolutely. And that was one of the really cool things about going to Nick Mason show as part of the Pantheon family and have people come up to you, what's this all about? And be able to say, yeah, we've got a legitimate podcast. We have people that listen. We've talked to guests and it's a thing that started off as a hobby, and really, I mean, this is a full-fledged show now. And I think that the thing that don't want to say that nobody else does this, but I think our big thing is that all we are fans. We're not claiming to be experts on anything. There's a lot of stuff I don't know, so that's kind of a cool thing too. Like when we were talking about Robert Plant's first solo record, you were talking about how he was going to become a teacher. And I was like, I remember the teacher thing, but I didn't remember that story. So it's kind of cool to go back and just learn new things and talk to a guy like Jim Cregan, who I was not familiar with his name, but familiar with his work, and a guy who we could just talk to forever. It's almost like he can't believe that he's done all this stuff too. Like, wow, to get to do these things and to get these calls and to get to live the life that he would always imagined. Like he made a comment about how nobody wants him to play like Steve Vai. They want him to play like Jim Cregan. Then you've done enough where people say, no, you're a legitimate persona, and we don't want you to play like anyone else. We want you to play like you because you've got your own sound. To me, that would be like the greatest thing ever. Like, I've got this song in my head, and I want Jim. I know he can do it. He can play it the way that I want it played on this record. Yeah, and hopefully we've created a show with our voices that is unique, and people don't want us to be like Shout It Out Loud cast. Right. People don't want us to be like Performance Anxiety. They don't want us to be like Martin Popoff. They want to be two old friends, one of whom was living in England or living in Europe, who are Anglophiles when it comes to our rock and roll. But we want to mix in some other stuff there, and it would probably be smart of us to focus or specialize in a band. Like, let's just do a show on Kiss, or let's just do a show on AC/DC or whatever. And you see like Uncle Steve's Iron Maiden Zone. It's just all about Iron Maiden all the time. That's great. Our buddy Neil at Def Lep Pod has the best Def Leppard podcast going, and you can really focus, and you do it on all their albums and tours and videos and stuff like that. But our tastes have always been eclectic. We continue to grow. Obviously, we're kind of going on this big prog process or, experience over these last 5, 6, 8 years, whatever. And we continue to grow up like that. Like you said, we don't know everything, but we'd like to. So we get out there and explore it, and we have built a little bit of a community and met other people who are like us, fanatics who want to know every detail and want to keep this music alive. Because, look, I know how old Jim Cregan and Steve Hackett and Rod Stewart and these people are. They're not going to be around forever. So as long as they're here, let's talk to them. Let's celebrate what they've done. And if they're still going, and I want them all to keep going as long as they want to and are healthy enough to do it, let's celebrate that and let's promote it and let's make sure everyone knows about it, because when it's gone, it ain't coming back. Right. And it is great to be able to live vicariously through them for a little while and think about what it would be like to hang around with in that scene. And like you said, just keep it alive and hopefully pass it on and maybe introduce some people in the listening audience to somebody that you didn't know before. And if we can get them to pass that along, that would be great. I've told this story before. I've got a coworker who I told about the story, and we had done a review of Led Zeppelin 4. Right. And he said, you know what? I haven't listened to that record in 25 years. Had a copy, pulled it out, listened to it, and said, I forgot how much I love this record. Then I've done my job for the day. Yeah, that's great. And look, and that's kind of a good example too. Like, how many shows on Led Zeppelin 4 are there? Well, there's actually probably a lot, but we get one person to tune back into it. That's worth it, But then we also do stuff like Pictures at 11 by Robert Plant. Not Now and Then, not one of the huge ones. We go back and do some deeper tracks. Like anyone could do Full Moon Fever by Tom Petty, but we do Long After Dark because it's celebrating a 40th anniversary. And guess what? It's a killer album. I love it. And it's not nearly as overplayed as something like a Full Moon Fever, So it's like, if we can turn people onto that, that's great. That's a lot of fun. So look, I'm thankful for the guests we've had on, both the artists and the, podcast journalist guests. I'm thankful to be able to go to live shows again. And we're going to keep doing that, here in 2023 and doing reviews. But I got to say, Jackson, I'm most thankful for your friendship, my brother,
and to be the one who wants to do this with me every week, because as you and I both know, and I'm guessing a lot of people who listen to this show know, most of your family members, you start talking to them about Gentle Giant, or you want to talk about the Ronnie James Dio movie, their eyes roll in the back of their head. It's like, okay, he's doing it again. He's going off on some weird tangent on some band. I don't even know who the fuck they are. But you are on this journey with me, my friend, and it really means a lot. And living abroad and then living through the pandemic in a place where you didn't know anybody, you couldn't go out, couldn't go see rock and roll. To have you with me on this, it really means a lot, and I appreciate you. I thank you.
And thank you for that. And I would say I would echo the same thing. And it's nice because you've got a regular life. I've got a job. I've got a family. Right. And sometimes stuff like this kind of gets pushed out of the way because you just have other things to do. That's right. And so this show, it makes me tune into these things and listen to records like Pictures at 11. Mm-hmm. And then, to get to talk to you again about all of this stuff. This is part 2 of a wrap up that we've spent probably 3 hours talking about. Right. And if I didn't have to actually go to work, we'd probably be on here for another 2 hours just shooting the breeze. Absolutely. So, yeah, I appreciate doing this and then reconnecting with you and getting to put this out into the atmosphere.
Absolutely. And maybe the bad news is I'm moving back to the States and I have to give up this European lifestyle that I've come to enjoy and all the many shows that I have booked to go see in 2023. But maybe it also is a good thing that, we can start seeing each other face to face a little bit more. We're not going to have to wait another 28 years to see another live concert together, Right. Right. And we're definitely coming back to Europe for the Iron Maiden shows, but, I got a feeling that we'll find something else in 2023 to do, and maybe it'll be with another Pantheon sponsorship, or maybe it'll just be you and I get a chance to see the Cult together, finally, after 30 years. How great would that be? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's the way you have to look at it. I know you're not super excited about giving up the European gig, but I think we can make some really great things happen back here in the United States, and also to be in the same time zone again will be fantastic.
It'll be, we'll probably start recording at night again instead of first thing in the morning for you. I might actually be able to build a little recording spot in my home. So we don't sound like I don't sound like I'm in a cave all the time. But no, here's the thing. Within a year, I'll probably have lived in about 5 different homes or maybe more, which is not great as a recording studio, I got to tell you. So everyone who has bared with us and listened through these many iterations as we try to improve our sound, and I've moved from country and location to location, we appreciate it. Anyone who listens to this show, we love you. We appreciate it. It's over 100 countries in the world have downloaded Ugly American Werewolf in London. Tens of thousands of downloads, hundreds of thousands of streams. It's kind of amazing and it's humbling, but honestly, we want to just kind of continue to take it to the next level.
Absolutely. And like you said, this is going to be a tough year to top, but I look forward to the challenge.
All right, my brother, all the best to you for a safe and happy new year. And here's to another half a century, man. You just turned 50.
Oof. Yep. We're still on the climb, but it's crazy to think, all of this, we talk about all of these records that we listened to in college, and to think about, like, not only would I get to interview these people, but one day you're going to be 50 in like a million years. No, right. It's now. So yeah, just it's great. Looking forward to the next part of the journey, and I'm excited.
Yeah, think about it in college, man. A 50-year-old record was like Benny Goodman or something like that. Now a 50-year-old record, is Dark Side of the Moon. Right.
That's all right. We'll keep the torch lit.
That's right.
Well, that wraps part 2 of 2022 in review here on the podcast. And I hope you enjoyed going back down memory lane as much as Jackson and I did, enjoying what we talked about, hearing about us talk with the various rock stars and artists and big guests that we had on the show. And we're proud to have on our show in 2022. It was really a dream come true to speak to some of these folks like Geoff Downes and Carl Palmer and Chris Slade and Steve Hackett, but to get to know some people that we maybe didn't know as well, like Amanda Lehmann, like Deobrah Bonham and Peter Bullick, and like Autumn Hawk Percival. Just a lot of fun as people who love rock music, who want to know as much about it as possible, want to explore and know as many different genres of music as possible, and who've loved it all of our lives and have always dreamed of interacting with the folks who have taken up space under the lighted stage to play music that people love. Just to have a chance to speak with them about what they do and how they do it was special for us. And I feel like a lot of them enjoyed being on our show as well, and hopefully some of them will come back. And of course, hopeful in 2023 and beyond, we'll have more great guests, great artists and musicians on to tell their stories, to help keep this rock and roll that me and Jackson love alive and well for decades to come. So, as usual, this is where I ask, folks, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You have got to let us know. You email us, uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can also tweet or DM us at ActionJack72 or at ugly_werewolf. Check us out on Instagram, on YouTube. And please, if you're thinking about it out there, when you're downloading and subscribing, think about giving us a positive review, because it just helps us find more rock and rollers like you around the world, helps us grow the show. And make sure you go check out our sponsors, rarevinyl.com, because if you go to rarevinyl.com and use the code podcast, PODCAST, you can get 10% off all of your orders all around the world. Phew. All right. Well, I hope everybody had a restful New Year's Eve and a restful holiday season, or geared up and ready for a productive 2023. I know Jackson and I are, but I don't know exactly what we're going to be talking about next week. That'll be a surprise to me, as it will be to you. So you have to tune in, you have to download and subscribe to find out exactly what we're talking about next. And to all of you rockers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.